Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. Welcome to Datagaps webinar. I'm Pooja Gupta, Growth Marketing Manager at Datagaps, and I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, we have a couple of quick housekeeping comments. First, we have muted all mics to avoid unintended distractions. Next, the chat room is open so that you can interact with us through the chat. And finally, at the end of the session, we will open it up for Q&A. Today, in this webinar on delivering trustworthy insights by automating the testing of Power BI environments, we will explore the critical need for automated testing in every Power BI environment. This webinar will dive deep into the intricacies of Power BI reporting challenges and demonstrate how Datagaps BI Validator effectively addresses these issues. On the panel today, we have David Small, Global VP of Sales at Datagaps, and Subhanshu Dikshit, Product Manager at Datagaps. And here is our agenda for today's webinar. First, how does BI Validator help to elevate Power BI reporting accuracy? Then we will discuss that how DataOps BI Validator supports data reconciliation to ensure data consistency for Power BI environments. This will be followed by the demo of Datagaps DataOps BI Validator by Subhanshu Dikshit. Then we will be also discussing about the real world best practices and case studies. And this will be followed by our Q&A session. Also, we have included a couple of polls which will reflect in the middle of the session. And we would request every attendee to share their feedback by answering those poll questions. Now I hand this over to you, Dave. Thanks. Stage is all yours.
Thank you, Pooja. And welcome, everybody. We appreciate your interest in Datagaps and taking the time out of your busy day to attend this webinar. I apologize, I'm having video issues, so I'm not able to broadcast my video, but we will get through things. So really what we're going to be talking about in today's webinar is the top 4 current problems or trends of Power BI testing or validation. So there's no doubt that the BI developer and the ETL developer have a huge task ahead of them to take data from your applications. Could be from Excel files, it could be on-prem data, it could be in the cloud data, and really orchestrating that, transforming that, and producing accurate and valid information in your data analytics platform. You know, whether that's charts or graphs or reports or metrics, that is a monumental task. And one of the things that they face is, how do we ensure that the complete pipeline is accurate and the information that I'm portraying in my dashboards are accurate? Because the number 1 or 2 biggest reasons people don't adopt the BI platform or the data analytics platform is because of lack of trust. They've been burned in the past. The reports aren't consistent. They may not be accurate. They don't perform well. And that's the number 1 issue behind being able to produce accurate information. So, you know, people will question, hey, is this chart accurate? Is that metric accurate? And is this particular graph accurate? And so what we are portraying, what we provide, is the ability to improve the accuracy through automated testing. So we'll go through the 4 current problem trends that Datagaps see most often. But I'd like to start with actually issue 0. So I sort of see this as, I equate manual testing to these games that we used to play where it would be find the differences, and we're doing this manually, right? And so a lot of manual testing, whether it's testing the visuals or testing data, testing the filters, a lot of that, when you're doing it manually, it takes an enormous amount of time, but it also, you almost always miss things. So I use the analogy of find the differences, right? So in this particular case, Beautiful dog. But there's differences in the two pictures. And how long does it take you to find all of those differences? I pointed out two of them. There's a third one that happens to be the legs. There's other ones. And quite honestly, if it takes you a long time to find all these things, that's the same thing that's happening in your manual testing in your data analytics platform. So the number one issue, I think, is accuracy in your data analytics platform. And how do you ensure that things are produced and that they are accurate? What you can do is really trace back the data back to the source if you choose to ensure that your metrics and your dashboards and the data that renders your charts and reports, that they're accurate by grabbing the underlying data that's rendering those dashboards and such, and comparing that data back to the source. And it ensures that you're having accurate information. You can also tie it back to other reports or other data elements. It could be Excel files, a variety of things, but you can tie it back to that through manual or through automated testing. So there's another issue, and that has to do with the filtering. Ensuring that the filters are working accurately and properly is critical. So we see quite often where you make a change in an application and all of a sudden the filtering is not valid, not accurate anymore. So in this particular case, yeah, certain filters are working fine, but then you hit a filter where it's giving you results that is either incomplete or it's giving the user access to data that they shouldn't be seeing. So accuracy in the filters are also critical. The number two issue we see is consistency. A lot of times corporations have certain approaches and they have a certain template of colors and palettes and fonts and such that they want to use to be consistent across the board. Certain charts are used for certain data types and so on. And then also filtering, making sure that the filters are consistent across the different platforms or the different dashboards and reports. So consistency is critical in this particular case. This might have been the development environment on the left, and on the right, it might be the production environment where that development was moved to production. But for some reason, there's a difference between the charts and it got turned around. You can also see inconsistency in the filters. So what we provide is the ability to be able to take and combine filters in a wide variety of ways to ensure that all the filtering is done in the proper way, and we automate that testing for organizations. We also will look at and identify that the colors, the color scheme that you're using in one of the reports is now changing, and that's outside the corporate standards, and alert you to the fact that the formats and the colors aren't correct, as well as the fonts. So here, it's a minor change, minor difference, but it does make a difference. And in this particular case, the numbers happen to be accurate, but not using the corporate fonts sometimes becomes an issue and a problem. And then finally, security. So as security is applied, you want to make sure that the security is applied correctly, consistently, and that people aren't getting access to the data that they shouldn't be seeing, or the security is limiting what they are getting because it is keeping them from seeing some of the data that should be on their dashboards and reports. All of these kinds of things can be tested in an automated fashion. And then performance, number three. The main reason, a lot of the reasons people abandon data analytics is because of performance. It doesn't perform well. It takes too long to render the dashboards and reports. And after a certain amount of time, people will abandon. You have SLAs a lot of times that that your organization needs to meet, and we can automate that testing to make sure that you're meeting those SLAs. So again, if the reports and graphs and dashboards take too long, then that will mean that people will begin to abandon the usage. And the other area is then put more load on the system, and now it's stressed, and now that performance isn't to the level that I expect, and therefore I'm having issues, periodic issues that crop up based upon the number of people that are using the system. So performance and all of these things can be tested, and you can ensure that the performance is meeting your SLAs. Now, we also see a lot of use cases where people are migrating either from on-prem to the cloud, and we see that quite often, and there's a lot of automated testing that needs to be done, even if it's like for like. So if you've taken your Tableau environment, in this case, from on-prem to the cloud, and you need to mitigate, or you need to do that testing to make sure that nothing has happened in that migration process. We also are starting to see a lot of people wanting to consolidate the number of BI tools that they have down to just a few. You know, we've seen companies that have 12, 15 different BI tools, and there's a extended cost based upon that in terms of, you know, training, in terms of support, in terms of software maintenance and cost and so on. So there's some real value in migrating to a few data analytics platforms. We see a lot of them moving to Power BI, or they may be moving to Tableau, but we see a lot of that migration. And that migration, what a lot of times we see is they want to migrate like for like, right? So in this case, we may be moving from Tableau to Power BI or vice versa. And what you want to be able to do is validate that the report that you were getting in your old system and that you've replicated in your new system, you get the same results, the same metrics, the same data, and so on. You want to be able to make sure and test that that migration process was successful. So we can do that through automated testing. In this case, we do data validation. So we can look at the data that produced the reports in the Tableau environment, look at the data that produced the reports and dashboards in Power BI, and we can validate the data between those two and make sure that the dashboards and reports are rendered on the same data. We can also do transformation validation. So going back a little bit further into the ETL process, when you make this transition from one platform to the next, then you also have to redirect your ETL processes and your transformations to the new environment. And we help do that transformation validation to make sure that your ETL processes are creating the right and the correct results. We can also check filtering. So as you migrate and you move, a lot of times filters are one of the culprits in causing some of the issues, and we help validate that those filters are working properly or the same in both environments. So we do that filter validation as well as layout validation to make sure that, yes, the layouts are comparable, the layouts match, and we want to make sure that we're consistent between your old environment and your new environment, because people like to have their graphics and reports and dashboards done, and a lot of times they do not like the change. So having layout validation is important, as well as the performance. So as you move from one environment to the next, is the new environment performing better? Is it performing worse? Are you meeting your SLAs? And then finally, the security that was applied in the old environment and the security in the new environment need to ensure that the security models are allowing the right data to flow through based upon which users are executing the different types of reports. So that's what I have in terms of a lot of the things that we see. And when people call us and they have use cases, you know, what are they trying to identify? What are they trying to fix? And how do they want to move from manual testing to automated testing? And what are the benefits? And we see it a lot along those lines is, you know, the accuracy, consistency, and so on. So with that, let me turn this over to Shivanshu and start with the demo. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the day. Yeah, let's get started with the product demo. Given that this is a webinar, we won't be getting into the nitty-gritty details of how these test cases are set up, but I'll be walking through the different ways these test cases are automated. We'll be going through different use cases that Dave has already gone through, except with some real-life examples of what we have done. Towards the end, I also have a case study that we can discuss. But before all of that, I just want to give a quick reminder on the application as a whole. The application can be installed directly onto your infrastructure, be it a cloud-based system or an on-premise-based system. This includes AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. And the main reason to basically proclaim this at the start is to ensure that any kind of data sets or reports that you're working with will remain compliant. The test cases, the connections, the reporting, every other aspect can be within your firewalls itself, and thus you don't have to worry about where exactly your data sets and reports are headed. And once the application is installed, we don't even get backlogs. Again, there's an entire section on auditing and security that we can get into, but if you're interested, we can have a separate connect on that. Next aspect that I quickly want to wrap up is the variety of connections that the application supports. The main reason to do this is, well, while Power BI is going to be the focus of today's call, you sometimes would like to ensure that you can run migration test cases or validate the Power BI reports against a plethora of data sets. This could be maybe an Excel file in an S3 location, or maybe something connected from a JDBC connector like a Snowflake system, SAP HANA, IBM 2 systems, or maybe even Azure Synapse. This screen here is to elaborate that the application has inherent connectivity with all of those data sets. And of course, if there is something that you do not see, we have CData connectors, generic connectors, as well as API connectors to ensure that one way or the other, we can connect to that specific data set. The connection to Power BI in itself requires only a username and password and an application ID, which can be fetched easily using the Azure portal or by your Power BI admin itself. So now that we've done with the basics, let's start right here itself with one of the very specific use cases that we're going to discuss. You see, the application has the capabilities of impersonating specific users, but there's one step further than that. The application has the capabilities as a service principal. You can impersonate specific user or user groups. And the reason for this is quite straightforward. While we create our test cases and we validate our report, we want to ensure that the report is valid not just for one specific user group or just for an overall super admin, but also for specific user groups when they try to access a report. In specific reports, what you might see and what I might see might be very different. So when we are running validations, it's critical that we run validations while impersonating specific user groups. This also comes in handy when trying to validate row-level security in a brute method. The main gist here is, while you can define permissions and other aspects in your Power BI system, it's very good to also have a simple check to ensure that the correct user group has access to the correct metrics. This is a small example that we can get into here as well. So that's a bit on the connections and, of course, the main aspect of impersonating different user groups. But the motif that I have mentioned right now, which is that you need to validate your reports not just at its default version, that's going to repeat again. And we're going to cover that in multiple ways. Within the data flows, I'm now going to open up a Power BI subfolder where I've created all the specific test cases. And I'm going to start with the very first aspect that Dave started with in the deck as well, which is making sure your data sets or your KPIs are valid, especially when compared against data sets or other aspects. So here, that's what we have. The presumption here is that I have a Snowflake table which acts as my golden records. And in between, there's a data model and there's a Power BI report. And I need to ensure that the numbers I see in this Power BI report, let's open up the Power BI report as well. So the numbers I see within this particular Power BI report, say it can be the bar graph that you see right here. It can be the corresponding KPIs as well. We need to ensure that these are valid. So that's one of the key questions that we have to do. Here, the application can inherently pick up all the visual information, and this information is information generated by Power BI itself. This is not the underlying data. This is the information generated by Power BI. In fact, these are the numbers seen by the end users themselves. Just to illustrate what I mean, if I go into the page and maybe apply a very specific filter, you will see that these numbers can change dynamically. We are now at 13159 as opposed to the about 200K number that we had. And so that's the first part of our problem statement. We need to ensure that we can pull all of these numbers from our Power BI system after the application of filters. And that's what we do. As an end user, I have already run this before, and I've picked up the information that I have. And now these are data sets. And that's where the critical part of the different connectors that I've showcased at the very start of the demo come in. Here, my example calls for a Snowflake system. However, If your system is different, if you're working with SQL Server, maybe you're working with CSV files, maybe you're working with multiple files in different formats, or perhaps you're working with regards to some output from an API system as well. If you want to connect the application to that and then use SQL, or if you want to use Python or Scala to create aggregations, you can do all of that before running the quality validation rules that the application provides. Here we have gone up with a very simple example where I have a singular or multiple tables within Snowflake. That's what I'm connecting to. And here I'm running the aggregation query within the JDBC connector as well itself. I can run this query outside in SQL and Python. I can show an example on that as well. But the main gist here is that we are getting an aggregation created from our table. Now, this aggregation created can be enhanced using the query builder. This helps you create the queries in a much faster manner. And of course, using OpenAI assistance as well, which can basically helps you create this queries much faster using LLMs. The way the application works is that we send out the metadata in this particular case to an LLM, and that helps the LLM create much more accurate queries. Again, all of this is optional. Again, you don't have to buy into this, but if you have to, you have the options right there. The end result, of course, is an aggregate created from our table in our database, and then we run reconciliation on both. So we talk about reconciliation, and of course, this is something that a lot of folks have done manually. This is where a lot of problems also come in. Firstly, you're working with very different architecture, so there are going to be inherent data type changes. The column names between the system. Now, luckily, we are working with the bar chart, so there's just 2 columns. However, if you're working with box charts or tabular systems, you might be working with 10, 20, or even 30 columns in a particular data set. And ensuring all of these are valid is difficult, especially when the column names, the column orders don't match. And in some cases, the number of columns between the Power BI system and your database might not match either. The application is going to handily automate all of these headaches for you, where at the end of the day, all you have to do is select the data sets right here. And the application is going to take care of the mapping, data types, all the other aspects automatically. It does that using fuzzy logic and a bit of AI. So here within this case, in this example, you see total underscore yearly underscore income, and sum of yearly income are quite different in terms of the names. But because of the yearly income commonality between them, the application understands that these two need to be mapped against each other. The application is also taking care of decimals as well as long systems, and it's also providing us a threshold. Now here I'm being a little generous by giving it a 10%, but you can define your very own 1% or 2% threshold as well. So that's one of the key factors. Now, I do realize there's one thing I've skipped over pretty quickly, and we can discuss that in a proper demo dedicated to your team as well. But here, the way I've selected my Power BI reports is as simple as going to the workspace and selecting the Power BI report I would like to work with. There's a lot of automation that I'm not going to get into right away, but the application has an automated way to create these test cases as well. Going back to our system, the mapping is done, the thresholds have been defined, that transformation of data quality, or data types is also done. In the results, the application is handily going to segregate the good and bad records for you. The good records are the one where we are defining the target values and source values are within the thresholds, and the bad records are the ones which aren't. So these are segregated into corresponding data sets. And from this point on, you can choose to do a lot of things. You can choose to, say, raise Jira tickets. You can raise a particular Slack notification. You can send out notifications to your Azure DevOps system as well if you would like. If you're using Azure Test Plans, the application has connectivity to those as well. And all of this is as easy as defining the plugin connection right here, or maybe working with the inherent connectors that the application provides. So if I want to, add the Jira ticket, all I have to do is write it in and I'm good to go. ServiceNow and all of the systems are also present inherently. And all I have to do as an end user is give the corresponding needed parameters. The best part here that I cannot get into right now due to time limitations is that the plugin system that you see right here is customizable, meaning you can create your very own plugins based on your very specific requirements as well. And if you have more questions on that, we can add in the chat, or of course, we can have a dedicated demo for that. But that's the first thing that we have done. We have run validations of our Power BI reports against data sets, and that's one way to validate our report. But working through the same system, another way to validate reports is by putting them against rules. So here we do a very similar system where we have a Power BI report. And in this case, the validation that I have to run is not just on the data. I also want to make sure that my slicer values are pertaining from a particular view. So here, what I mean by that is within region, I want to ensure that these 6 values or 7 values don't really change. I don't want UK, I want United Kingdom here, or not US as well. Along with that, I want to ensure that the sick hours by department, this particular system, it follows a particular range, and of course, other such types of rules as well. To do this, what I do is quite straightforward. I pick up the data sets I'm trying to work with, and instead of comparing them against something else, I apply basic rule. I apply rules to ensure that these values are pertaining to, say, a specific set of values. I apply rules on precision. I apply rules on the length of this particular column. I apply rules on ensuring that the slicer list pertains to the existing original list and it's not getting altered. And I apply a lot of rules in this particular way. I also apply the range check, which I was discussing earlier. So I applied a range check on a particular chart to ensure that it's between 1 and 1,000. However, here the application has found one record, which is upwards of 8K. And so the application has run validations, not just in terms of the reconciliation, but also in terms of rules itself. The final use case that we're going to discuss here is, of course, make validations based on profiling and other aspects. So we're going to rush through this one because, again, it's a little complicated on what we define right here, but it's very useful for the end user. What we mean by that is that as a Power BI user, you can actually define profile systems which can keep track of your day in, day out Power BI report. Or let's pick this up with an example. Say you have a weekly Power BI report and you have to keep track of the numbers, KPIs, and other aspects you see with it day in and day out, or maybe in a weekly basis. Now, while you can define rules to ensure those numbers are correct, these rules are subject to change. And of course, the fact of the matter is you're working with real data, and real data sometimes is going to have a lot of specific problems associated with them. So here the application has inherent methods, and this is just one part of the puzzle, which is profiling, where you can actually keep track of the volume, the aggregations, the mean, the total count. And even if you're working with, say, seasonal data, or if you're working with, say, a data set which has external factors affecting it, the application has machine learning code in identifying if there are differences present within the system. So all of this can be done inherently within the system. So here, if there's a row count shift, or if there's a mean count shift, the application can easily capture that. But let me finish this part of the demo by showcasing an example where we have done a similar thing, except we're doing things on a much more complex level. So we've done this exact same use case here. And within this, we are trying to ensure that the spikes, the red line spikes that I see here, are actually valid. So here I apply a bit of machine learning, and the application is capable of finding out the anomalies specific to that subcategory. And all of what I'm showcasing right now is customizable. But the main gist here is that in real time in your reports, as you move along, the application has the capabilities of finding out anomalies within your metrics as well. So you don't have to go to the data layer to run observability. You can run observability within your BI layers itself. So that's one aspect of validation, which is ensuring that your data sets are valid. But let's move on to the other one, which is ensuring that your corresponding Power BI report is valid cross-version and in terms of UI. So now that we are in this particular section, let's see what I mean by just a basic example. So what you see right now is a couple of reports which represent multiple examples. These reports could be reports in dev and reports in production. These reports could also be reports present in, say, different versions of the same branch. Basically, the report A is the newer version and report B is the older version. But what you're trying to capture here specifically are the differences between them. So, of course, what you see highlighted are simple differences that the application can easily capture. Of course, if you would like to exclude just these type of differences which you're expecting, there's exclusion zones present within the application as well. But more importantly, the application has got data differences, as you can see. And the application has also got visual differences. So if I get into this example right here, the application has run and found out differences between these two reports. And in this particular use case, we see that the application has found that the title of this particular chart has been shifted in alignment from center to left. But that's not the entire story as well. The application, while we are doing this, let me open another example with a chart that might be a bit more specific. Let's open up recent runs to illustrate how this looks from the end user perspective. So as an end user, I can actually see what has happened in my previous runs in the past, and I can go to a specific use case right there. And within this, let's open up a reporting section that's been generated already. We'll come back to this from the starting point as well. But here, you'll see that the application has done the exact same thing, where the application has found out differences in a particular, much more complex chart. Not just textual differences, but any kind of shifts as well. So here we see that there's a text difference and data difference. But if I shift into appearance, we see that the differences are also in the placement of calendar year, which has been shifted. So the application has captured all of this. Apart from this, the application has also captured filter differences itself. So the main aspect here is that in one of the systems, the default filter has been defined as an operator not in, but in the original version, this particular filter was absent. And that's not it. The application can capture filters at page, report, as well as visual levels as well, and capture the differences between the same. Finally, one of the most important aspects is with regards to the duration that you see right here. You see this particular load duration is the time it takes for the report to be loaded in after the application of our filters and how long this particular report is taking to load. While we're running this test, we're also running this type of test where the application is going to keep track of the performance of a particular report. And if there's a lot of difference between them. So right now we're working with 12 seconds versus 14. So it's a relatively short increase. So that's something that's excusable. However, if this was about 24 seconds for our result load duration, or if it was about 30 seconds, which implies about 100% or maybe even doubling of the loading times, that would have raised a flag in its own, showcasing that, yes, at this particular point, this report is taking a lot more time to load in and the end user should look into it. So in this way, with a very simple use case, which is as simple as at the end user defining what exactly you would like to do. So just to go back to that use case, the way you define it is as simple as dragging and dropping the reports you would like to work with right here. The application can perform this type of validation. So with the single test case, we have covered a lot of stones, as you can see, with performance, with regards to visual validations, as well as with regards to filter-based validation. But that's just one aspect of the use case. Now, you saw me go into very specific folders, and so far we've been seeing test cases from a very one-to-one perspective, which is that we can perform this test case for one single report and that's it. However, the application provides you a good set of use cases where you can just create these test cases in bulk. That's what I've done already in Power BI dashboard. And to illustrate how easy it is for the end user to do, I'm going to generate BI data flows and I'm going to show it live. So here, let's go for a regression test case within Power BI. And as soon as I go to the next system, the application is going to give me the list of basically the corresponding data sets I have access to. So here, let's go back to start and also showcase that you can choose exactly which workspace you would like to work with as well. So here I will select Sandbox. And then let me select a good chunk of the reports right here. And it's as easy as dragging and dropping. The application is going to give you access to the specific systems. And while we are here, let's discuss a bit about filters. This is something that we have skipped so far. You see, at the very start, I had defined that if you're working with a report, you need to ensure that it's valid, not just for its default version, but also after the application of filters. So if you want to do that, the application has a completely dedicated DevOps section, which automates a good chunk of it. But what am I talking about here? You saw that in the very first example, if I go into filters or if I update this particular value, the data sets are being updated. The truth is that you can actually get into the filter section and you have access to all different layers of filters as well as slicers, and you can parameterize them. And that's the key here. The application can parameterize the filters and slicers defined. So when you create a particular test case, you can reuse the same test case while basically defining different combinations of filters. So in this particular case, if I have a particular filter on hierarchy and some other filters on specific data tables, either I can choose static values, or as you can see, let's go within, parameterize this value to my requirement. So here I can just say here. So now I'm working with the parameterized value. And so when the test case runs, it's going to run for every permutation and combination of the multiple parameters I'm running in. And that's where our horizontal, the scalable architecture, Spark-based architecture comes in handy, because yes, sometimes these type of test cases do run in the hundreds and even thousands, but we have made sure that the application is capable of running these type of test cases, because some KPIs and some reports are that critical and we don't want to leave any stone unturned. Of course, the final use case here is to just create the test cases. And of course, you can get filter differences as well. This is what we have seen earlier. And the way these test cases are generated is I just click generate and all of these test cases will be generated. I've done this already in the past. And that's what the Power BI dashboard folder looks at. This is all the test cases that we're working with. With each component is still editable, and you can go into a specific page and create a specific subquery if you would like to. The way this runs together is in pipelines, where you define how exactly you would like to run the validations. Again, this is entirely dependent on you. Here I've chosen to run a few parallel lines with a few sequencing, because I believe certain reports are basically built on top of the other ones. So there's a bit of dependency there, but you'll see that the application has capabilities of running multiple reports in parallel as well. Every time I run a particular test case, the application is going to generate multiple reports for me. Of course, the first one is going to be a zoomed out level report, where out of my entire dashboard of 14 reports, I've seen only one of them has failed. This particular one has failed. And within them, the application has pointed out exactly what has failed. We have seen this particular report previously, but that's what this particular report came from. It was something which took me about just 5 minutes to set up. And now I have something set up which can be added on incrementally and of course run within just a few minutes as well. So in this particular way, what I've done is for the end user, I've created this system where anytime I'm creating a particular Power BI system, maybe there are updates coming in, or maybe someone is going in or maybe changing transformational logic to my critical KPIs. I have a base set that's going to run validations, not just on the data, but also the visual level as well. And of course, all this is coming on top of the row level security application that the application inherently has. What I mean by row level security right here is that the application can inherently check if a particular user has access to a particular data set or not. All you have to do is define a simple rule to it. So here I have the same test case, one has failed and one has passed. The reason the previous one has failed is because the specific users, so let's go to the definition right here, the specific users who are trying to access this specific report right here, they did not have access, they shouldn't have access to a particular data set which was pertaining to France. They should not have had access to particular France records, and so the application has captured that. But for the sake of example, I've given them the particular use cases, and then I've run the system again. And in this case, everything seems to be fine because the users, in this case, once again, have the correct and intended access. So in this way, the application also supports row-level security amongst the other slew of things that we have just discussed. The final aspect is, of course, with regards to BI validation, cross BI validation. And again, that's an entire ballpark in itself, and we have done a dedicated webinar on it. But given that Power BI is becoming a kind of a crowd favorite, at least from our perspective, we see that at certain use cases such as these, where you want to ensure that a particular Tableau report, which looks a little like this, is being validated against its Power BI counterpart, which looks a little like this, both in terms of data, in terms of filters, as well as in terms of the overall visual placements. So there's validations on all three fronts. What you're seeing right now is an example where we are making sure the corresponding data sets are valid. That's what you see right here in terms of category and other aspects. So if there are any mismatches, the application can capture those. And of course, if there are mismatches in terms of the visual elements, the application, while it can capture that, the application in the upcoming release can also capture and create an AI summary which summarizes exactly what the differences are. Because as you can imagine, a Tableau report and a Power BI report are inherently and architecturally so different that if you run a pixel-to-pixel comparison, you are not going to find a lot of differences between them. However, an AI summary is going to help you tremendously, as we have seen from our testing as well, in capturing the specific differences that in this case, the color legends are different, the actual order of columns between the two systems are different, and of course, the placement of the charts might be slightly off. And the application can capture all of that along with the data, along with the loading times across different BI tools, and of course, the metadata of slices and filters. In fact, the application can map slices and filters to Tableau filters as well if needed. So there's an entire rabbit hole of features and optimizations that the application inherently provides, but this is what the application does. So yeah, that's a bit on what our application does already. We have a good chunk of material that that we have gone into where this comes on all together. But the way this comes for a particular use case is using a case study. So I have the test case as well as a case study use case of how exactly we've deployed this. You see right here, the application has, this is a case study that we have, and again, we can send this out as well. This is for a migration and then data quality management use case, where a particular client of ours who is a Fortune 500 financial services company uses our application in the medallion architecture type. And here they want to ensure that as the data sets move through their system, from their vendor to their bronze to their silver, gold layer, all the way to the BI layer, we are keeping track of the measures, we are running quality rules, and of course, the BI aspect is given. The ETL quality systems, the output validation, as well as the data quality at ingestion are separate products that the application does. This is an example where all those tool sets have also been used. But as you can see, Power BI was an integral part here to ensure that the final numbers being sent out to the end user are valid. And to this end, let me open up a test case where we have done this exact thing. Is this. So as you can see, it's very similar to what we were seeing earlier. We're keeping track of aggregates created from multiple systems, Snowflake, SQL Server, and of course, running DAX queries themselves to ensure that the underlying data model within Power BI is valid. So again, if this is a particular requirement, we have a slew of use cases that connect to DAX specifically and run these queries. However, in the context of this example, as you can see, we can keep track of where exactly these problems arises, because say you find some mismatches between your Power BI report and your golden layer. Well, where exactly did it come from? Was it in the data model? Was it in the transmigration between silver to golden layer, or where exactly did it come from? So you get complete visibility on that, and that's one of the ways that our application has been used. So yeah, with that, I can finalize, summarize the entire demo use cases that we've gone through. We have validated our report in terms of the KPIs being accurate, backed up against data, backed up against rules, backed up against the patterns and anomalies that we have seen previously. We've also done validations in terms of visual level validation, which is ensuring that a layout of a report, something as simple as a font being altered, or something as complex as filter values or default filter values being changed, the application can capture all of them as well. The application also keeps track of the loading times, cross environment, as well as cross versioning. And as you can see, since we have connectivity to data sources as well as other BI tools, cross BI validation is something that we are becoming a huge player in currently. And of course, all of this comes with the customizability that you can think with, as well as the automation that comes with the application inherently. So all the test cases that you can see, I can create them automatically, and I can integrate them with my Azure DevOps pipeline, my CI/CD Jenkins pipeline, or any other type of pipeline that I'm working with. The reports are generated automatically, the notifications are sent out automatically. So the end user can be rest assured that whenever there's a new, say there's a new change pushed into the production layer, the data quality pipeline can be run automatically, and a PR report can be generated as well, making sure that nothing of consequences has been altered and only the intended changes have been made. With that, I would like to conclude the demo. So thanks a lot for listening in. And of course, if there are any questions, feel free to type them out in the chat.
Hey, hi, Shivanshu. So we have a couple of questions. First is in data gaps experience, where you see most of the issues arising.
Oh, that's a very interesting question. So, we have a lot of discovery calls and demos where we try to pertain to a very specific requirement of our clients. And I see that the base problems that we see are twofold. It's on the KPIs being accurate as well as the versioning. So the first two use cases that we covered up, there's a half split between them. So what we've seen is that there are some reports which are, say, public reports. These KPIs at no point can be wrong, and if they are wrong, that's a huge problem for the corresponding firm. So in that particular use case, the KPIs being accurate is critical, and that's why the test cases for them also are critical, and that's one particular part where we see a lot of specific use cases. The more common one on other systems is cross upgrade and cross versioning validation of reports. That's something where we have seen a lot of rise as well, given that the application has a good amount of use cases there. There's also a good chunk of stress testing, and that's something that we haven't gotten into yet. And if there's a dedicated requirement for them, you can definitely reach out to us. But ensuring that the loading times in your Power BI reports are valid, and to stress test the Power BI system so that these KPIs are being met, the application has support and test cases for those as well. And that's another place where the application is seeing a lot of issues coming from the client side.
Okay. Thanks for the response. Second is, what are the most common causes of report and dashboard breakage after a Power BI environment update or upgrades?
Yeah, Power BI is a little more stable than Tableau. Tableau is something we have seen this a lot more than Power BI, so that's kudos to them there. However, after a particular dashboard has been so if an environment has been upgraded or updated, we see that the main problem statement comes into aggregation because of the inherent differences between dev and prod in the way those transformations are deployed. So yes, there's going to be absolutely changes and validation required when you're trying to validate the KPIs between them. That's going to be critical, and a simple regression test can do that. And the other aspect is that the performance can sometimes be affected heavily as well. This is not as rare as you might think, because transformational functions are being optimized quite routinely. However, if there's a very specific requirement within your report which requires you to connect to 50 tables altogether, sometimes after upgrades, we've seen that the corresponding transformation is not as fast as it used to be. So again, apart from the usual use cases, unusual culprits are the filter values being automatically changed, their order being changed up. The filters now affect more data points that they should, and a lot more things. So depending on your use case, update and upgrades break the report either in data and in visual validations. But performance is something that we have also seen in our experience.
Thanks. Next question is, what steps can be taken to ensure that data accuracy and visualization integrity are maintained after a Power BI update specifically?
With regards to update, the way we recommend it is to run a regression test case. Have a snapshot of what the Power BI report looked like before and after. That's what we see within our dashboard, this particular use case that we're working with itself. When we're running a validation right here, we're running validations in the previous before and after section. So when I do that, I'm keeping track of everything. And this includes all the data, the reports, and other aspects as well. So that is critical. And if you have an automated way to do it, that's the best way for it. Because in this particular use case, once again, it keeps track of everything. It keeps track of the data, the metadata like the reports, filters, slices, and other aspects, as well as the visual elements along with the performance. So a one-to-one comparison before and after an upgrade is the best way to do it. And as you can see, it's very easy to set up in a lot of tool sets as well.
Great. Thanks. There are no other questions from the.
All right. Okay. Over to you, Dave. Over to you, Dave. Pooja.
Yeah.
Mr. Bachu and Pooja, thank you so much. And for the attendees, we appreciate your time. If you would like to have a little bit more in-depth conversation with us, we do discovery calls all the time. Just reach out to us and we will be happy to understand your requirements and potentially put together a demo that helps illustrate how we can help you solve some of the problems that you're faced with. We appreciate your time today and look forward to hearing from you. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, Dave, for an in-depth understanding of Datagaps BI Validator, and Shubhanshu for an extensive demo of Datagaps BI Validator for automated testing of Power BI environments. So also I have shared the links if you people are interested, anyone is interested in the BI Validator free trial. And if you have any specific set of use cases to look at, our team can definitely help you out with a personal demo. You can always drop a note to contact@datagaps.com. Thank you, everyone.